I'm Kevin Maguire and welcome to Pole Position. Well, it's all over except the vaulting. Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak do their final rallies. Is this an earthquake? Hello and good evening. Look, the polls are off the scale. I just do not know whether to believe them as they project Labour majorities of more than 200, which would be incredible. When at the last election, the party finished with just 202 seats, lowest total since 1935. It looks almost certain that Keir Starmer will be the next Prime Minister of this country. But what will the Tory party do? And who will all those new MPs be in the House of Commons? Well, tonight we're joined, I'm delighted to say, by Michael Crick, veteran journalist, political observer, ran the hugely popular Twitter X feed, Tomorrow's MPs. Michael, you detailed who was being selected.
That's right. It was great fun. I mean, I've always taken an interest in who gets chosen as a candidate, partly because at one point I hoped to be a candidate myself in my youth, but nothing ever came of it. It's always the turning point in somebody's career. Also, it's sort of politics in the raw at the local level. There's all sorts of fixes and fiddles and cock-ups that go on. And if you talk to any MPs, they've all got their selection stories, how they got chosen, how they fiddled it, how they fixed it. They got the unions to do this or that. The ones they expected to get, they didn't get. But it gets very little newspaper coverage or media coverage at all these days, particularly with the demise of so many local papers. And I find it fascinating. I thought I'd have a go. And it's, I can't stop. I'm hooked. And I'm going to do it for the rest of my life, or as long as my brain keeps working, which may not be much longer. But it's fun talking to them all. At times, I've been a sort of advice service. They've been ringing me up and saying, well, what should I do next? I lost this one. And I say, keep at it. Because I think the view behind the whole thing is we need good people in public life. The world is in huge trouble right now, and it needs the greatest brains on the job.
Michael, you covered as a journalist every general election since 1983, which is 11. You did the 3 before that as a toddler activist, the 2 in 74 and 79. How does this one compare? Because I know no 2 elections are alike, but this just feels like it may be an earthquake, in which case we're going to have presumably a record number of new MPs as well as a change of government.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say this election's really boring. I don't think this election's boring at all. There's so many, the main story itself, hasn't changed. Labour's going to win with a handsome majority. We just don't know how big that majority is. And the Conservatives haven't really managed to change the poll at all much. But there have been so many other stories, the re-emergence of Nigel Farage, the whole gambling story, little local stories, the activities of the Greens, there's the Labour versus the SNP in Scotland. I mean, there have been some really boring elections in the not too distant past. I mean, like the elections of 2001 and 2005, where particularly 2001, the end of Tony Blair's first term as Prime Minister, where the figures barely changed at all, and we had to go around the country reporting it all, knowing that was going to happen. I suppose the other crucial thing this time is that, in the last few elections, is that the campaigns have become a lot longer, 6 or 7 weeks. So that means we have more of it, which I love. As an election watcher, that's great from my point of view. There's so much more that can go on. Although I think that, the media hasn't done that great a job. There's all sorts of stories they might have covered, lots of questions they should have been asking. And I think there's also been an element, as there always is, of not being perhaps as tough on Labour as they should have been, because they don't want to offend some journalists don't want to offend the people who are about to come into power.
Yeah, the winner's premium. And
yeah.
Of course, campaigns are now incredibly centrally controlled with an iron discipline, and it's very difficult to get a candidate to speak to you without them getting permission of party HQ. It's really, really difficult. You wrote a very well received biography of Nigel Farage a few years back, Were you surprised he appointed himself party leader of Reform and decided to risk what would either be an 8th defeat or his first victory?
I was surprised. Yes, I said that he was enjoying broadcasting too much, making loads of money in the process, enjoying exploiting his friendship with Donald Trump to flip backwards and forwards across the Atlantic, hoping to play a big role in the presidential campaign over this summer and autumn. But I think two things happened. First of all, I think Nigel Farage's career was radically revived, his political career, by whichever idiot it was in Coutts Bank, endorsed by NatWest Bank, the group bank, who decided they were going to block his bank account, which was an utterly illiberal and terrible thing to do, in my view, although I don't agree with most of Farage's views. And that he got amazing support for his campaign, including from lots of people like me who weren't Brexit or Reform supporters. And that really buoyed him. I mean, I used to see him going into the GB News studio every now and then and seeing that he was really on cloud nine. And he then went to the Conservative conference and all the delegates loved him. And Sunak said he'd be welcome in the party. And then he did at the ITV programme, what is it, In the Jungle, whatever it's called.
I'm a Celeb.
I'm a Celeb, sorry, yeah. And that really, it revived everything. And I think he when the election started, he thought, okay, if I stand, I can make a difference. And he thought, if I don't enter it this time, I will regret it for the rest of my life. And because he's the owner of Reform UK, although journalists very rarely point that out, he owns a majority, 13 out of 25 of the shares. Reform UK is essentially a company, not a traditional party with members and branches and conferences and so on. He could just make the decision, say bye-bye, Richard, although it hasn't quite been like that, but he's not been very nice about Richard twice since he took over. He was able to make that happen. And of course, it looks like he's going to win Clacton. And it looks like Reform UK are going to get even more votes than UKIP got at their peak, which was just under 4 million in 2015. So it's worked in a way. The big question is how many other MPs will they get? You know, some people say, well, it'll only be a couple. Some of the polls are predicting it could be nearly 20.
Yeah, I'm told he used to refer in private to the magnificently covered Tice as the hairdresser. But before we get on to all the characters who might be coming into the House of Commons backgrounds of the MPs and so on, do you think if that split on the right of British politics continues between the Conservatives and Reform getting 10, 12, 14, 18% of the vote, is that going to usher in a Labour era?
It could well do. And in fact, it will do unless they do something about it. And it's quite clear that whilst Sunak was welcoming to Farage last autumn, and indeed so was Tom Tugendhat. I mean, I asked Tom Tugendhat at a fringe meeting whether he'd welcome Farage in, and to my astonishment, he said he would. Well, they're not saying that now. Even people on the right of the Tories are not saying that now. They realise that allowing Farage into the camp, getting into bed with him, would not be good for them. And so you're going to get that tussle going. It could go on for years. It could be a lot more damaging even than the SDP Labour split that we both remember from 40 years ago, which partly accounted for why Labour was out of office for 18 years, because all the Social Democrats led by Roy Jenkins and David Owen and Shirley Williams and so on went off on their own and ultimately joined up, of course, with the Liberals to form the Liberal Democrats. But this war on the right between the parties, and I'm sure, lots of activists will leave the Conservatives, join Reform. I suspect a lot of Conservative members and activists are going to be voting for Reform, have voted for Reform and will vote for them tomorrow. And of course, donors as well. It could mean that Labour rule by default. I mean, actually, if you look at the polls right now, the Labour figure is sort of only in the late 30s percentage-wise, which is, generally the thinking is you've got to get 40% to form a majority government. But of course, the split on the right and the way in which Reform have taken so many votes from the Conservatives means that that is accounting really for this, what looks like it's going to be an astonishing, perhaps unprecedented in modern times, Labour majority.
Now, the Labour machine has been brutal in parachuting stormtroopers into safe seats, keeping off left-wingers, sometimes trade unions. Can you talk us through, just assuming Labour's going to get it, as you say, a handsome majority, some of the new faces, characters we will see in the House of Commons?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's only about, I say one hand, it's probably fewer than that, actually, of people you can say are on the left of the Labour Party. In fact, I came across one of them today because I've been writing profiles of all of them. There's a guy called Brian Leishman who's standing in Alloa and Glenrothes in Scotland. And he's on the left. And I thought, God, how did he get through the system? Because normally they were blocked by the high command. And a lot of them just gave up trying because they knew they'd be blocked and it was a waste of time and money and effort. And this guy, Leishman, is really interesting, actually. He's a golf professional at Alloa Golf Club. So he'll be looking for a very big swing to win that seat from the SNP. And I look forward to meeting him. But so the left is out, really. I mean, there's going to be hardly any new left wingers in the House of Commons. I mean, Angela Rayner, I don't think would have been selected under this regime, or John Prescott or Neil Kinnock or anybody like that. What are the other characteristics? Well, there's loads of military types. I mean, I think Labour claim there are about 14. I think it might be even more than that. I mean, there's Alistair Carnes, who's standing in Birmingham. He's actually won the MC. And there's another Tory MC, although actually he probably won't get elected, a guy called Lincoln Jopp. He was going to get elected, but I think Spelthorne, where he's standing, is probably going to go to Labour. That's just around the area around Heathrow. But it's interesting why there are so many military candidates in all parties right now. And I think it's because the public trust people who've been in the armed forces. They're regarded as principled, patriotic. They get things done, that they've got a sense of duty and of public service. And of course, for many of them, retiring from the armed forces, which they have to do, pretty early in life in many cases, going into politics is a sort of natural move. It involves risk, and it's actually better paid in many cases to go from the armed forces into politics. Whereas a lot of, quite high-level, high-ranking careers involve a pay cut if you're going to become a politician. And so, and what will be interesting is how much they operate as a group, pressing for more defense spending, for example, because there always is, of course, a great sense of camaraderie in the armed forces. And I think that there will be camaraderie, not just amongst the Labour veterans, but also with veterans from other groups, because you've seen the same trend in the Liberal Democrats and certainly in the Conservatives as well, although there may not be many Conservatives left overall.
And I wonder if there's going to be a lot of saluting each other as they go around the Palace of Westminster.
And now, of course, the word comrade works. Will make a return in Labour circles.
You've unearthed quite a few musicians as well.
Oh yeah, there's loads of musicians. I mean, they've all got bands, and well, there's two well-known ones. Dave, I mean, you've got to forgive me. Your viewers will have to forgive me. I know nothing about music, but there's Dave Rowntree, who was the former drummer in Blur, I believe, standing in
quite big, yes.
I'm not sure actually Labour's going to win even mid-Sussex. But there's another guy called Tom Gray, who's standing in Brighton Pavilion. That'll be a struggle as well, because that is a Green seat. So, and I think the Greens will probably, Caroline Lucas's seat, what it was. So they'll probably keep that. But there are other ones who are sort of, people who've been in bands, as a sort of a bit of a hobby. And I came across this afternoon this extraordinary woman called Mel Dawkins, who is standing in Faversham. And that's one of those, seats right now that's just on the edge. Labour will just about might win Faversham. And she is in a wild, what's described as a wild feminist punk band. And she says she got involved in politics when she saw that Labour was becoming more socialist, which must have been a while ago, I think, because you wouldn't say that right now. And her band, they've got, you can see online, in fact, it's on my Twitter feed, they've got a CD album, which has got songs like F off and die, although it's not F, it's the whole word, and another word employed the same thing. So I suspect she's going to be quite a colourful figure if she gets into the House of Commons, a sort of even more colourful figure perhaps than Jess Phillips. And
Wow.
the one I love, let me have the one I love is a woman called Margaret Pinder, who's 65, and she is standing in Beverley and Holderness. Again, you would have written that seat off a few weeks ago. She might win that. She is a double bass player with the Hull Philharmonic, professional, and has done all sorts of other jobs as well. She's taught Greek tragedy at Harvard. She's been a Freshfields lawyer in New York and a lawyer in London. She's a stand-up comedian. She's got the most amazing CV. And there are several oldies who've done lots of different things in life, and who are sort of all coming in, who will be coming in, assuming the figures, are right for the polls, be coming in around about 66, 64, 65, and will provide, I think, a bit of ballast. Whereas there are also an extraordinary number of young candidates. I mean, there could be at least 20 MPs in the new House of Commons, nearly all of them Labour, under the age of 30, which is a modern record. I mean, in the 19th century and the 18th century, you used to get teenagers. Well, the 18th century, before the Reform Act, you used to get teenagers. But to have so many young people, will be a real difference.
I've nothing against the under 30s, but I'm looking forward to those who will truly make Parliament the palace of varieties. Michael, thank you so much for joining us, giving us all your insights. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night on Pole Position at 10 p.m. after the exit poll. Thank you for watching.